Blessings, a community of spouses. Listen, Coach T here with you today, and I have a word I want to share with you. As always, I want to encourage you on your marital covenant, reminding you what Matthew 19:6 says, what God has joined together, let not man separate. What God has joined together, let not man separate. And so today, I want to talk about your spouse being your enemy. Your spouse being your enemy. What happens when your spouse becomes your enemy? What do you do when the person you love becomes envious of you, jealous of you? What happens when their objective is to see you suffer from the injury that they have caused? What do you do when the person you love turns completely against you? They take away their emotions. They take away their heart. They take away their love. Everything about that person that you know has been derailed by some type of barrel, some type of blindness, some type of dark cloud has overtaken them, and they are no longer your spouse. They are no longer your spouse in a sense. Now, I'm not talking about for the ones who said, listen, I'm going to get my gun. I'm shooting up this whole house tonight. I'm going to do this. I'm not talking about that, that over possessive spouse who, want to control you and want you to do what they want you to do. And if you don't, they become physical. I'm not talking about that kind of spouse. I'm talking about that spouse who you wouldn't be able to tell there was something wrong if you didn't ask a question or if you didn't say a certain thing. That spouse who's quiet, that spouse who's very passive, that spouse who just is just going along just to go along, that spouse who, maybe doing things that you see that something don't seem right, but you don't think is a big deal. I'm talking about that kind of spouse. The Bible says in Matthew 10:36, a man's enemy will be the members of his own household. A man's enemy will be the members of his own household. What happens when the person that you said I do to, has now completely turned into your enemy, From a natural point of view, you have to recognize in that moment that there's nothing you can do about that person's insecurities towards you. There's nothing that you can do about that person's decision, about how that person feels, about how that person sees you. There's nothing that you can do at that point. Nothing you can do or say will attract them to back to you when they're in that state of mind. From a spiritual point of view, you have to recognize what the enemy is doing and how the enemy is using them. So a lot of times I get asked the question, what is the difference between counseling and coaching? Because I am a coach, I get asked the question like, what happens, if a person, what's the difference between a person going to, get coaching and getting counseling? A lot of times counseling is trying to come up with a diagnosis, trying to, dig things up from the past that's causing people to, why are you behaving like this way? And why are you doing this kind of stuff? Or why you kind of do this kind of stuff or whatever. Whereas a coach is we getting straight to the point. Okay. We're going to where you are, what you want to do, how we going to get there. That's what a coach do. We dive right in. We dive right in. And so when you have a situation like this and you say, okay, well, I'm going to go to counseling and see if, I can get this situation, adjusted, even if your spouse is willing to go to counseling, counseling's not going to help. Counseling's not going to help. When your person has turned into a person like this, spiritual warfare is what is needed. How do you protect yourself from such a person? Or even stay in a marital covenant with a person like that? Like, do you divorce your spouse because They jealous of you? Like, have you ever asked that question? Like, do I divorce you because you jealous of me? Do I divorce you because I can do something well in one area and you may don't do it well in that area? And see, that's what a lot of times people are getting it mixed up, where it's like, when you come into a marital covenant, you have to have the full understanding that it's not just me, it's we. When you come into a marital covenant, it's no longer just, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do these things. I'm going to do these things. It's, we're going to do these things. We're going to, you have to get away from the me syndrome and go to we. Narcissistic is real. Narcissistic is real, and is evolving. But God is greater. You have to know your specific assignment from God in areas like this. I know the diplomatic way of marriages shows, oh, my spouse is my best friend. We do everything together. We share everything together. We work together. We do ministry together. We roll together. This is what we do. And that's a pretty picture for some. That is a pretty picture for some. But some spouses do not have it that way. So then you think, okay, well, what happened for it to get to this place? Or, what went wrong? Or how did it turn left? Did the spouse do something to cause this type of injury on themselves? Did the spouse say something that caused this type of injury on themselves? And it don't have to be any of those things. Sometimes you get involved or marry a person and that person don't show you that side. And this is why I always go back. I always try to put out there about the importance of premarital counseling or premarital guidance. And sometimes even when you have the premarital guidance and have that type of thing, a person can still be hiding underneath a mask. They can still be hiding certain things. Sometimes you don't see certain things until you get married. Sometimes certain things don't come out. Life can happen to a person and change a person. It can change their whole outlook or their whole view on life. And so you marry this person and y'all start out, things are going well, this and that, whatever. And then all of a sudden, boom, this person completely changed on you. You like, what in the what? And so this is why I always emphasize that it's important to, yes, do premarital guidance, because at least with doing the premarital guidance, even if you don't see what's underneath that mask right away, at least you will be aware. You will be aware. You will have a heads up. I emphasize the spiritual side of the marital covenant because people are walking in marital covenants blinded. They are walking into the marital covenant blinded. And so when they get hit with stuff like this, it's almost like, what happened? What went wrong? And the first thing we want to do is jump to divorce. How do you handle a person that you supposed to spend the rest of your life with, and they have strife and discord towards you? How do you handle a person like that? How do you deal with a person like that? As emotionally, mentally, it could drain you. It could take you out. How do you deal with a person who is constantly throwing jabs at you, or this is a big one. Emotional abuse is big in the marital covenant. So a lot of people ask the question, do I stay in a marital relationship with a person who's been emotionally abusive towards me, And one of the things my mother used to always say, and I'm not saying this right, my mother used to always say, when you get a stomach full, then you will know. When you get a stomach full, then you will know what you need to do. You will know what your next move is going to be. You will know what your next decision is going to be. And not only that, I am a true believer that God would not allow these things to happen if he is not, one, going to use it for something for your good later. If he's not, two, going to help you in this situation. And if he's not, three, going to deal with that spouse who's causing these things. What end up happening is when that spouse is being abusive and saying words and throwing jabs and saying something, what end up happening, the other person, out of a natural reflex, you say something back. Oh, you this. Oh, well, you this too. Oh, well, this and that. Oh, well, this and that to you too. So you just like you go backwards and forward, and nothing gets accomplished. Nothing gets accomplished. And the enemy is sitting back, laughing and saying, ha, 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 ha. I got them. When what end up happening is you have two people who are dealing with their own insecurities, one just being more verbal with theirs, And instead of dealing with it, instead of dealing with the issue and dealing with what they got going on, they are throwing fire at you. So how do you handle a situation like that? How do you deal with a situation like that? Well, what I say first is you want to get in alignment with God's will. You want to get in alignment with God's will. You want to go to God like, God, look, listen, this ain't working. This is not happening. This is not like, how you want me to do something like this? Let me tell you, this is not everybody's call. Everybody is not called to an abusive relationship. And like everybody's not called to handle this type of neglect. Everybody's not called to deal with a spouse who really, in a sense, is broken themselves and have had some type of injury done to them in their past that they're not willing to deal with and address. And so you, being the next closest thing to them, they're kind of, in a sense, throwing their crap on you because they don't want to deal with themselves. Now, does that make it right? Absolutely not. Does that mean you have to sit there and deal with that? Absolutely not. But you do want to make sure that you're being led. When you're in marriages like this is the perfect picture of God and his people. This is the perfect picture of God and his people. You and your spouse, y'all make a decision. You're going to get married. Everything is nice. Peaches and cream. We're going to go to the altar, sing all the wedding songs, do all the wedding bell things. Everything is beautiful. Now I'm in this marriage covenant and boom, you done switched over. Let's just go back to the children of Israel. God sent Moses to deliver the kids, to deliver his children from Egypt. The kids get out of Egypt. They rejoice. They happy now because things is kind of like at a standstill, on pause. Now we over here. Now we on this side. Now what? And they end up switching out on God. This is also a perfect picture of the story of Hosea and Gomer, where God told the prophet, listen, go and get this wife. She's a prostitute. She is not going to do you well. She's going to do this, this, and that. But I want you to still go after her. I want you to still love her. I want you to still do these things for her. I want you to still treat her like a wife, even though she is not acting like a wife, even though she is not going to honor you as her husband. I want you to still treat her like a wife. And so when you're dealing with a spouse who almost in a sense has become your enemy, you want to get up underneath the umbrella of God. You want to get in alignment with him. You want to first hear what God is saying to you concerning this marital covenant. God, what's going on? What is this? What am I supposed to do with this? How I handle something like that? Because our natural instinct is not going to be bothered with no crazy person saying all kinds of things, you calling all kinds of names, because the next thing you know, you're going to start doing the same thing. You're going to start calling out names and saying the same thing. You're going to start acting just like them. And God does not want that. God does not want that. You have to recognize that when these things are being happening, you have to, at that time, at that moment, show them Christ. Now, sometimes you may have to show them Christ from a distance, because even Jesus said, if you're not received in certain towns and certain places, look, step out the side, shake the dust off your feet and keep it moving. So sometimes you may have to show this spouse these things from a distance, but you want to hear what God is telling you. God, I'm not going to deal with this type of mental abuse. God, I'm not going to deal with this kind of abuse. What is it that you're trying to show me? What type of development that I'm supposed to get in this? Am I supposed to be suffering through this? Am I supposed to be going through this kind of stuff? And a lot of times couples think that they're not supposed to suffer a little bit in their marital covenant. They think they're not supposed to go through depression in their marital covenant. They think they're not supposed to go through hard stuff in their marital covenant. But those are the things that God used to develop you. You're asking the question, can God use something else to develop me? Why he have to use the hard stuff like that? Why he have to use my spouse being an enemy of mine, which is a biggie. This is one of the I would say one of the hardest positions to be in as a spouse. You for your spouse to treat you like an enemy. Not only that, once you get what God's word is saying, you want to educate yourself. What kind of person I'm dealing with? What's going on? You want to start praying and asking God to give you some type of revelation on how to love this person like this. How can I love my enemy? What does the Bible tells us to do? If your enemy is doing this, you give them food. If your enemy is thirsty, you give them drink. What does the Bible say about loving your enemy? You have to do what God's word says concerning loving your enemy. Not only that, you want to start warfaring for your spouse because something is obviously wrong. There is some type of demonic possession that has taken place over them. And you have to recognize that you're no longer dealing with the person that you married, that you fell in love with, that you are now dealing with The enemy himself. The enemy himself is using your spouse to be this way towards you. Everything that this spouse is saying to you or doing to you is hitting you. It's hitting you. It's hitting you because some of those things that they're saying is true. Some of those things that they're saying, hey, it brings something out in you, and God can use those things. God can use those things to develop you, to make you stronger, to make you better. But listen. This is not for the weak. This is not for the weak. You got to know what you're doing. You got to know that you know what God is telling you. God is not going to tell everybody the same thing. Sometimes he may say, no, you know what, this and that and other, I'm putting you out. I'm pulling you out. But if you have a call in your life and God is using you for a greater cause, God is using you for something bigger, sometimes he will allow persecution to take place in the marital covenant. Persecution to take place in the marital covenant. I get so sick sometimes listening to people always putting out there that, oh, my spouse, my best friend, my spouse, my best friend, my spouse, my best friend. What if your spouse not your best friend? What if you and your spouse don't do things together? What if you and your spouse are not on the same page? What if you and your spouse are not level-headed? What if you're dealing with a spouse who treats you like a stranger? What if you're dealing with a spouse like that? Then what do? Do you divorce that spouse because they're acting that way? Do you cast them off? Or do you get the development and get what it is that God wants you to learn in that? You have to be in contact with God on the regular so you would know how to handle a person like that. What do you do with a spouse who's saying, I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to go and come as I please, this and that and other. What you going to do? You can put them out. You can say this. You can do things. You can do all this kind of stuff. You can make your own way. You can say whatever it is you want to say towards that person or whatever. But you want to make sure ultimately that you hear from what God is telling you to do, because you don't want to have to continue to, like the children of Israel, they was in the desert for 40 years. They weren't supposed to be there that long. They was not supposed to be there that long. They were supposed to get what they were supposed to get and keep it moving. But they was complaining and grumbling and this and that and the other. I want to encourage spouses on today. If you're dealing with a spouse and he or she is acting like your enemy, ask God, what is it that you want me to get from out of this? What is it that you're trying to show me? What is it that you're trying to teach me in these moments? Lord, help me to get whatever development that I need to get so I can go on to the next. And at the same time, also be praying for that spouse's salvation. Be praying for that spouse's healing. Be praying for that spouse's deliverance, because something obviously is going on with them to cause that kind of affliction on someone else. We hear that saying all the time, hurt people hurt people. And so for another individual to try to hurt another individual, they have to have something going on with them on the inside that they're not willing to confront or deal with. So when you're going through hard times and hard moments like that, I know it's hard to put the bigger hat on, turn the cheek like the Bible tells us to do. I know it's hard to do those things at sometimes, but you just want to start praying and get into a place, especially if this has been an ongoing thing and you've been dealing with this for a very long time. You want to get into a place where you can say, God, what is it that you want me to learn out of this? What is it that you're trying to get me to do? What is it that what call that you have on my life that's going to require me to have to be and stand up to giants? One of the stories I always tell people, I remember growing up as a young girl, I was the oldest of 7. And so I had to always seem like we had these group of guys that stayed in our neighborhood, and they would always want to fight me. And I could not understand why these boys want to fight me. It would make me sick to my stomach, because I felt like I had to, one, protect my siblings. And on the top of that, it's like I had to protect myself, because if they come for us, we obviously gonna have to do something. And I just could not understand for the life of me why I had to always deal with these boys wanting to fight me and my siblings. I mean, it was like an everyday thing. And no matter how much we would try to avoid them, no matter how nice we was trying to be, doesn't matter how much, we try to stay out the way, these guys was coming for me. And I remember one day being in the mall, because, we had moved, and my parents would meet us to come pick me and my siblings up from the mall. And they follow us to the doggone mall. You talking about scared? I'm like, what in the world? And so later in life, I realized that God was using those moments to develop me for something else later in my life. So look at that situation in your marital covenant. What is God trying to get to you through your hard season? What is God trying to get you to learn with your spouse? How is God trying to show you how to love your spouse when you're going through hard times? How is God trying to get you to pray for your spouse when they're behaving this way, especially with ones dealing with addictions and different things, childhood trauma, childhood wounds, things like that. You dealing with somebody like that who was not honest with you in the beginning, or who didn't share this kind of information with you. That's why you need a coach like Coach T, because I ask those kind of questions in my sessions. And so sometimes people are, they doing they doing these surface premarital sessions and not getting to the root of issues. But sometimes you have to get down deep into the root of things to get out things. Otherwise, you will have to figure out later on in life. So spouses, I want to encourage you. If you are dealing with a spouse who is your enemy, get up underneath the umbrella of God. Get in alignment with God and see what his will is for you concerning your marital covenant. Love your spouse just like the Bible tells us to love our enemies. I hope this message has been a blessing to you. Blessings.